and it's my boss.
It was a dead end job.
Not yet. Oh, God.
So, just a quick little bit about me. I'm Donna Driver, born and raised in East Helena, and my husband and I and our daughters moved here about 16 years ago, and done a few different jobs here. My previous job was at the Butte Rescue Mission thrift store, which is on 123 East Park, and at one time was an undertaker's. And so I went from the undertakers to the cemetery. How does that work? But
Dead end, I would say.
I know, I have to land on the road now. But I just, it felt like it was where I was called to be, that, and I've really enjoyed it. It's brought me so much information, and I've learned so much about the Butte community, the Butte people, the history. So I just thought it'd be kind of fun to share that with everybody. And also, if you're into genealogy, what you can find, and just a little information. And there was so much information that I've come across, and people sharing with me, Zena, Beth, some of my volunteers, that I started to get overwhelmed. Oh, I've got to put this in, I need to put that in, but it's like, well, I just have a little spattering and some fun stuff, and we'll just see what happens. Let's see what happens if I push the right button. So, as I said, I'm the family service advisor for the Catholic cemeteries here in Butte. So, Holy Cross and St. Patrick Cemeteries. St. Patrick's was established about 1881.
I'm going to hold you. I think your turn.
Yeah.
Keep talking loudly.
Okay, so St. Patrick's Cemetery, as we said, about 1881. There's some questions on that, and Holy Cross Cemetery was 1912. So one thing that I did was I made a little mystery icon, and so if you see that there's a question, if I don't mention it, you can say, hey, what's the question, or and if you know the answer, feel free to share it, because that's kind of what this is about. Me learning, you guys learning, and just sharing what we all know. So I have this picture. It was in the Butte Evening News from 1910, and it's St. Pat's Cemetery. As you can tell, it looks a little different than it used to. Let's get this one. There we go. All right, let's see if that'll work.
That sounds better.
So that beautiful arch gate entrance was there in a couple different pictures. So in this funeral procession, which was sometime after 1910, don't know whose it was, but the way we figured out it was after 1910, anybody?
The M on the middle.
Yep, the M's up on there, because it was placed about 1910. Little trivia, the little attire that the horse is wearing, that's called scrims. And you can see the trolley tracks too, it used to come out there. But I went to the diocese archives and I could not find any note or paperwork on the arch, what happened to it. I've asked around and nobody that I know of or I've spoke to knew anything, what happened to it. Zena Beth mentions it in her book that maybe, kind of the end of the Victorian era, they decided to take it down. But where it went to, and why, for sure, we don't really know. So St. Patrick's Cemetery originally was known as the Catholic Cemetery, and most of the land was acquired from the Northern Pacific Railroad, and there were a lot of mining claims in that area. I mentioned, the different deeds and all that, kind of some boring stuff, but in 1881, this article, Mr. J.H. Harper was engaged in drawing a plat of the Catholic Cemetery, which has lately been surveyed. But I can't find those original drawings either. I've done a little research that the drawings that I have of the cemetery was from 1934. In 1912, it was said to be all sold out. And the first person, as far as we can tell, interred was Catherine Butler, and that was February 10th, 1881. Said she was 28 years old and the wife of Maurice Butler of Walkerville. In the 1880 census, though, I show Maurice and Kate were 35 and 30, so somebody's not telling the truth about their age. So that's the 1880, 81, but then we show 1885, it was given to, or started by Bishop Brondell. So it's kind of a little collage of, not exactly sure, but that time frame. St. Patrick's Cemetery, lots of great deaths there, and one of the first things you'll see is the priest and sisters section. There's at least 31 priests and 42 sisters, probably more. All of our records didn't always get updated in each file, so depends on which file you're looking at. I'm trying to combine everything with the help of some great volunteers. Here's some great pictures. I hope you don't mind, Father Bretta. So one of the biggest cemeteries, funerals, 1906, Father J.J. Callahan, who was one of the first Irish Catholic priests in Butte. I believe he was at Sacred Heart Church. When he died, they had the St. Patrick's Church, they had to reserve one whole side for people who had carriages. That way, at the end of the funeral, everybody who had carriages would leave first so they could get all, get in the carts and get it all ready to go, so it wouldn't take quite as long. I thought that was interesting. And then his headstone is right here, and as you can see, our wonderful Father Beretta, also with the Father Patrick Brosnan, the headstone, who had died in the flu pandemic that Father Beretta had shared at his presentation a while ago. And there's, of course, lots of other important priests and people there. One thing about Butte, a lot of clubs, organizations, fraternities, and they would purchase plots of land for their people to help take care of them. And so we have the Hibernians, they have a whole section in here, and I didn't know, and I saw the RELA, the RELA, or whatever, and I was looking it up to see what exactly it was about, and I didn't realize they were actually part of the Hibernians. And so this kind of, talks about that, how they were kind of split up and worked, and how it was active in Butte. So that's, this here is for the Robert Emmet Literary Association group. And then there's the Cristoforo Colombo section, which of course is what nationality? And St. Philip and Jacob Society? Croatian, yeah. Woodsmen of America, they didn't necessarily have a plot, but as I would go around and take pictures, I would see this logo, and I thought, what is that? And so Suzanne, who does a lot of the Find a Grave and taking pictures, got me these pictures. And so just a quick thing, the Joseph Colin Root originally founded the first group, Modern Woodmen of America, because he wanted to create a fraternal benefit society that would bind in one association of the Jew and the Gentile, the Catholic and the Protestant, the agnostic and the atheist. While he succeeded with the MWA being that type of organization, Heated arguments resulted in Root and another man being evicted from the society. So, and then they eventually did build or create the for the women too, and the women's auxiliary. But that being said, I found this roll of honor. And so now after just reading that, I wonder if it was for the woodmen of the world. But, so roll of honor, Catholic cemetery in the names. I thought, it sounds a lot of Irish, but then Protestant. So I'm not sure what club this was or organization. Anybody familiar with that?
You know, we could tie the names, we'd have to look up the names in the city directories and see, or find their obituaries
Right.
and see, that would be a lot of work.
Well, and
Somebody
that's
wanted
the
to do
problem I
that.
ran into, because I was like, oh, let me look this up. Oh, wait, let me look that. Then it's like, no, I gotta just get this,
Yeah.
stuff together. So I thought, well, it'll just build interest.
See,
In
what is, and it
Yeah.
might say in one of
Yes.
them.
My grandfather was in that.
His name's on here.
I don't know. You can't read it from here.
Oh, okay. What's your grandfather's name?
It's Rogers.
Monsieur Rogers. He was in the Woodmen.
Yeah,
Okay.
I got a picture of him in his uniform.
Oh, that's neat. Well, I don't see his name on this list, but that, this was just one list, and I don't even know a year or anything for it.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of interesting. So one of those mysteries that I've run across. So we also have designated lawns, like the Spanish-American War veterans area here, and then we've got the Prayer Rock that was created. There's other veteran sections, and then Babyland, which the Lady Hibernians took on as a project in about 2003, cleaned that up. There's other veteran sections. There's, I think there was another club too that I forgot about, that I've seen some names and thought, oh, I gotta check into that. And then there is also, besides this Babyland, the Paupers Babyland. And so, here's a picture and just kind of a fun little epitaph, or not a fun, a very nice one. 'Tis hard to break the tender cord when love has bound the heart. 'Tis hard, so hard, to speak the words we must forever part. Dearest loved one, we must lay thee in the peaceful grave's embrace, but thy memory will be cherished till we see thy heavenly face. So, and one thing about this Pauper's Babyland is I noticed all of a sudden that it had all the little crosses and stuff, and my friend Diane and I would walk out and we ran into some people there once, and so there's a gal who, I believe it was her grandmother, had a couple babies that died and are buried in there, and she comes, Kelly is her first name, and her own time and money, and fixes this area up. I believe she makes the crosses, and she's got a friend who helps and paints them, and so she's our Babyland angel, I call her.
Where is this?
So this one is almost, this is in Holy Cross, and so if, so this is facing west, so the airport is right there, on the other side. And so it's just kind of really a neat, special thing that she's been doing for us. And I've always, hoping to eventually, I gave her a list of all the names of babies there, maybe get some cards and have those attached to those crosses, so to keep those memories alive and to show our respect for these babies. So Holy Cross Cemetery, again, 1912, it was purchased. It's about 111 acres. At one time, they estimated about 39,847 graves were surveyed. The front entrance is in memorial to Lee Irvin Russell, who I believe worked for the Montana Power Company. And so another curious thing I came across was some cemetery reports for April to June of about 1912 said that Hagerty Lumber Company, $100 of lumber towards the sexton's new house. I didn't know there was a sexton's house out there ever. And Kenny, the current sexton, says he never knew of it. And I can't find any pictures, any record of it. nothing. And the building that is my office now, we thought maybe that was it, but I have the blueprints and the plans of it being built. And there's no mention of the sexton's house being torn down so we could build the new office. And I tried to look at some old plats and can't find anything. But I did find Thomas McGuire, who was the assistant sexton for St. Pat's in 1912. He became the new sexton. In 1914, his residence was Holy Cross Cemetery. So the house did get built, obviously, or maybe not, but so that's another one of our mysteries. Where was the house and when did it get torn down? Because there's no record of like a fire or no mention. So that's one of our little mysteries. Some people that were buried there, one the History Club is working on, Lizzie Preston, who died in 1919, said to be about 100 years old, had been a slave, came to Montana from Fort Benton to Butte, and one record newspaper article said she came with a Army officer as their nurse, and she ended up working in Pleasant Alley in our red light district, and was a very colorful person. But one thing I can't, we're trying to get a headstone made for her. One thing I can't verify is that she did work for Custer. Because in another incident, she claimed that she was the daughter of a famous Indian chief. She was in trouble and she still got fined. So we didn't help her. So the Custer connection we can't quite confirm. I've checked with different Custer experts and museums and books and haven't been able to verify that. And one of the things that jumped out with me with that is my husband, Donna Driver, they're from Anaconda, and his great-great-grandmother was Susan Elizabeth Tinsley Mundy, who had been a cook for Custer and had been a slave. And so in Fort Leavenworth, she is mentioned in one of Libby Custer's books as being the new maid when the other Eliza needed a break. And so we have, that's what I was trying to find, some sort of verification, some mention of Lizzie Preston in, you know, so we can substantiate that claim. So that's one of our little mysteries, trying to verify that and then get her a headstone. 1933, Anthony Sullivan, who was an employee, was struck by lightning and died there. Just a little fact. Airport disinterment. So there was a little jog in our property line right behind where the baby section that I showed you was. And the airport wanted to expand their runways and needed that little space. So there were over 200 some, is it like 200? Disinterments, and it was all mostly paupers. Probably most of them didn't have headstones. And so they were removed and placed in a section towards near the mausoleum. And they were all given one little block that had their name and the dates on it, just a simple, so it would be marked. And that was in the, I think, 82, about 1982. And so, and I understand it was not a very fun job, and that there were some complaints about it taking too long. Come on, you guys, get busy, get these done. And so then whoever the director, whoever was complaining, they said, you come and watch us. And then he gave him a break after that, seeing how, you know, they had to dig up and find the pieces and, you know, showing that respect and making sure everything was taken care of properly, respectfully. So in this picture, this is a picture I took this spring after I started. I had a visitor, I don't know if you see him on the left.
Yeah, that's cute.
Where is he?
Right there.
Oh my gosh!
So this is our mausoleum, and it's a community mausoleum, and it was built about 1998. It's a building that has tombs, is what it used to be called. Now they're crypts for full body interment. And let's see, there are 240 crypts, which is a possible 432 full body interments. And how that works is some of them on the bottom, there's a level below it also, so you can fit two in there. And some of them, they're 2 deep and 2 down. So that's, how 240 could have 432 increments. At this time, there's only 82 crypts left. Most of them are on this, in this area here. This is facing north. On the exterior, we have 2 exterior sides, and then inside we have some. And we do allow cremains also in the crypts. You pay the full price of full body though, it's the same price either way. Inside, we do have a bunch of niches, and that's for cremation, and those are allowed 2 each. There are some on the walls, and then a center aisle of niches, and there's about 272, and they've all been sold. Mausoleum family, so then you've got the community, and then this is the family mausoleum. This was for the Hennessy family, which I'm sure most of you know, the department store movement, and he died in 1908, and they had to place him in a grave until his mausoleum was built, and then a year later they placed him inside. Also included is then his son, and then his sister-in-law, and I did get a chance to finish looking this up. Mrs. Hennessy, I don't know, Suzanne, did you were gonna check, did you find anything different on that for me?
No, I just found a Margaret Hennessy
Okay.
and Mary Furlong Hennessy.
Okay, so maybe,
I think the sister might have been Margaret.
but it was her sister, so Mrs. Hennessy, DJ's wife, and I don't know if anybody else knows this, it showed her name was Mary Furlong Hennessy, but then another thing said Mary Furlong was her sister, so maybe Margaret, so there was a little confusion, and I didn't get a chance to double check that, so I didn't have my little mystery logo up here, but, so, don't quote me 100% on the names or in like what her name was. I have to get that taken care of. But as you can see, it was quite the, they changed from horse and carriages to, they've got the cars now for his. And then we have the Borkman mausoleum over at, and so that was at St. Patrick's Cemetery, and this one is at Holy Cross Cemetery. And Borkman, everybody assumes it's for the judge, George M. Borkman, but actually it was for his son who had died, and he was, as Zena Beth mentions in her book, which is a great resource, and buried in Butte, and so he was an up-and-coming rising star following in his dad's footsteps and lawyer, and so his dad built it, you know, out of honor and respect for his son. And so then it looks like we have before, so the son, and then Mrs. Borkman, and then another son, and then the judge, who was 80-something when he died, I believe, so a bit later. And then we have our columbariums, which columbarium is a Latin word that means pigeon house. So there's 80 niches each, and this was the first one that we had, and it's on the south side of our mausoleum, and it is sold out. And then we have a new one, and there's plenty of space is still available in that one, and that allows for 2 sets of cremated remains to be interred in there.
It's actually Dove House, not Pigeon House.
Pigeon, oh, okay,
Dove.
Dove House, that sounds better, I guess.
That sounds better.
I guess one article I looked up, it said pigeon, so I was like, maybe I'm gonna change that. Pigeon, dove, they're all God's creatures, right?
Yes. Yes.
So 1912 was when Holy Cross was established. The first person interred was Thomas Manning, who was a Montana pioneer, a native of Ireland, and he, his grave is like right here, and of course there's no headstone. So, and one thing I always tell people when they come and try to find like a relative and it's way out, one of the old ones, and there's no headstone, that is, we call it now, it's not a tombstone, it's a headstone or a memorial, because it memorializes that person. And so when I have people coming and doing genealogy, they want to go out and they want to see that headstone and remember that person. And so it's really important, and we still allow it. So some of those old graves, you know, we put on what they call the baby headstone, just a flat marker, just so there's something there to remember those people by. And it's really important for some family members to have that to connect to. Let's see, Shoestring Annie. Who knows Shoestring Annie? Everybody's heard of her, right? Well, a little interesting fact. So she was one of the people that had been in the airport disinterment. So she has a little stone here. But the interesting thing is, the stones nearby, you can read the names. Hers is crumbling. And I thought, how odd. Of all the ones around, hers is the only one that's crumbling. And that's another one that I thought would be kind of neat, working with the history club or some club, to get an actual marker for her, since she was such an interesting character. One thing I found was that when she died in 1934, they mentioned how she had came over with her husband, who was blind, and would walk around and help him, and sold brooms and shoestrings. And then when he died, she took over the business, right? Well, in a little research, because I thought, well, where is he buried? Maybe, you know, figure something out there. Well, then I saw the census, 1910. They were in Belgrade. It said John H., born in Ohio, no occupation. Rose K., 42, was born in Scotland. 6 children, but only 2 alive. She immigrated in 1873. 1920 Butte census, James H., John H., that's close, right? For census work. And born Ohio, now the broom maker, so that makes sense. Rose E instead of K, 60, that's 20, 10 years difference. Okay, age, again. Born in the high C, no occupation. 1930 census, Butte, so Rose 73, divorced, not widow. Born in Massachusetts, a salesperson. Then I found John Heron, 1874 to 1941, 1934. Died in Warm Springs, usual occupation, peddler of shoestrings. Paranoid insanity. He was in Warm Springs 20 years, 2 months, 2 days. So she may not have told the truth about what happened to her husband. And, using that sympathy card, I'm a widow, poor widow, maybe. So that was interesting. So he is buried in Warm Springs Cemetery. Then we had our airplane crash, which was a very sad, and actually we're going on the 10th anniversary this month. There were 3 families on board, and they were on a ski trip to Montana. All 3 of those families perished. My friend Diane got a card she had sent to one of the family members and the grandmother or the mother of this family. So she had sent that card, and so that's one of the families.
And they were all related, somehow related.
Yes, yeah, they were all 3 of those families were related, sisters, brothers, somehow. And so, how heartbreaking for the grandparents and friends and families. But
We have a nice memorial out there.
and there is a nice memorial out there
Yeah.
that I did verify it. I know, my understanding is the diocese paid for it, but somebody said they thought Bernie had donated it, but maybe Bernie donated his time to engrave it, which is a substantial amount of time and effort too. So it is a very nice memorial if you get a chance to check it out. This was another thing that I had trouble with. Former sextons, which means cemetery manager. At St. Patrick's, started out with Martin Likely, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. And then Edward Sherman, who was part of the Sherman and Reed, I believe. And I'm not sure if I know how to say it. Maybe Father Breda, how do you say Reverend Peter?
The Siri.
Siri. Okay, and then I showed Joseph Narby. And at the time, Joseph Narby was the sexton. Thomas McGuire was the assistant. So in 1912, then he took over the Holy Cross And then I'm not sure when Joseph Narby ended. And then here, time frames kind of got confused. I'm not sure when Thomas J. McGuire ended. I know he was a sexton and lived in the house over there, but I did get a chance to go through the books to see when the last date of residence was, the Pope Directory. And then there was James Fleming, and some of these, and Tim Gilmore, John Little, Dan Shea. I may have forgotten some, I apologize if I did, but trying to figure out who, what, where, when, but, so just a little interesting.
Donna, I want to say something about Father Desiri.
Please.
He is a seminary classmate of the great Saint Damien of Molokai, the great saint who died and dedicated his life to the lepers of the island of Molokai, and who died in 1889. They were classmates in college and in seminary.
Wow. Very interesting. Thank you, Father Beretta. Oh, wait. And so this was another one of my mysteries, and unfortunately, even though I had read, not in full, but I'd read through Zena Beth's book, Buried in Butte, but I saw this about 3 Indians, and I hadn't heard about it before. But Zena Beth had it in her book also. But there is a little more to the story that she didn't have. But I saw this in one of my lectures, and I thought, 3 Indians? And so I wanted to be able to honor them and have their names in, writing. And so I did get that with the help of volunteers, Suzanne, and some of the Silver Bowl genealogy people too. And so the poisoning of 3 Indians, they came in and they brought a demi-jug and gave it to this Mr. Verona, who was a tailor, I believe, and that was common. And bought some alcohol. And usually it was some cheap alcohol, but they weren't too picky. Unfortunately, it was very cheap alcohol this time. It was wood alcohol, which was not for consumption. So 3 of them died, and so Mr. Verona was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in jail, but was released after a few years. And their names, let's see, I have John Cardinal, and then I just had Cam and the gal, there was a gal, I believe, was the 3rd one. Pan, Cardinal, yeah, and then Canaste, or Canaste, was a squaw, they said. So, who also? So there were 2 other people who had also drank, but not quite as much, so it did not get them. But a couple things, I didn't know what a demijohn was, and it said they were in Wickiups near Rocker, so I had to look those up. And so for those of you who don't know, a demijohn is a jug similar to this, and the Wickiup is a little wigwam type tent that they would make.
Where were they buried?
They were buried at St. Pat's Cemetery, and I unfortunately didn't get a chance to see if there were any headstones. I'm not sure that there was. One thing, so at St. Pat's, and I believe it's kind of behind the Hennessy Mausoleum in that area. And one thing was that the Swell Indian funeral, because they died in here and there was somebody convicted, the county had an obligation for the burial of these people who had died. And so the Indians said, yeah, we want them buried. And so they got the coffins and all the fineries that anybody else would have gotten at that time, and had a cemetery. So that's why I thought, well, I wonder if they got a headstone too. I haven't had a chance to check, but if they did, it may be, corroded by now. So that was.
And then what about the tribe moves its camp? Which tribe was it?
So it was some Cree, yeah, like right here it says Cree.
I wonder where they moved.
They just moved on. That was just like a temporary. They came to town doing some trading and what have you. I think they were down. By the stock houses? Yes.
So,
That's right, I said Rockford, but I think you're right,
That's
near the
right.
stock houses, they
Yeah.
just set up a temporary camp, did some trading, getting supplies,
moved it.
whatever, and then they just moved on
Yep.
after that.
It was bad karma.
Yes, because it was bad karma, bad luck, or whatever they called it at that time. But now at the first cemetery, talking about Catherine Butler, I went to the museum archives and spoke to a couple of gentlemen there and said that Catherine Butler, they said she may have been buried near the old Belmont Cemetery. And I said, the Belmont Cemetery? Well, over by the Belmont Mine, there had been a cemetery. But then there's a couple other articles here, First Cemetery, just south of the Catholic Church. And, you know, they talk about it here. Over here is a little article, First Cemetery located over on the Black Chief, which I'm not sure where that was. There's 24 graves, and they had to be moved when that mine became more popular. Burying grounds were just as important as saloons in the early days. Imagine that. So there's a little bit of conflict of where was that first cemetery. First cemetery is probably somebody's backyard, somebody, you know, or just off to the side of the mine, wherever it was convenient, unfortunately. What's that?
Either that or it's under St. James.
Or under St. James. We saw Stevens, that's right, that was the name of one, it was called the Stevens Cemetery.
That was after the mine was there.
Yeah, and so it's Crystal and Silver Street, we were trying to look because I think that's where Stevens was. And, but, you know, don't tell any of the residents in that area. If you live there. So, genealogy, one of the things that I have come to find a passion for is genealogy, helping find loved ones, and there's lots of things. So if you're at the cemetery, things that you can find, if you're trying to find a loved one, and you hit what they call the brick wall, you know, these are some things to look at. So we have the date, basics, or, you know, date of death, the location of the burial, the age, and then sometimes pictures of headstones. If there are the old permits, we only have them, I think 1915 or around that time frame. I don't have before that. But they may tell you who the next of kin was, the address they lived at, date of birth, place of birth. There may be some other odd notes on it. You just never know. So I always try to look that up when people are trying to find somebody, or even if it's not this person, but if they know this person was a relative, then you can go from there and try to find more information. And also then our ledger books sometimes will show who owned the plot, how many spaces were purchased, the payment was made, how much, and a lot of times people, if there were extra graves that haven't been used that great-grandmother had bought, they want to sell them back to us. Unfortunately, our policy, we're not in the buying, selling, we're selling, you know. And so if one of our policies is that we pay what it was paid for originally. So it may have been $5. So, but we do a tax donation since we are a nonprofit. You can donate it back to the cemetery, and that's a nice little write-off at today's prices. So, and one thing I found is that the price of funeral cemetery arrangements has doubled over the years. And I thought, really, every 10 years approximately it doubles. And so if you think of it, $5 back then 10, you know, and it's like, oh, yeah, that does add up, and we're at the prices we are now. So I pulled, just to show you, a permit. This was one of the first ones I pulled out. 1915, Alfonso Bianchi, I'm not sure, 51 years old, died cirrhosis of the liver right here. It didn't, imagine that.
Yeah.
What alcohol, I don't know. But no next of kin, unfortunately. Sherman Reed was the undertaker's. Just a single grave, $15 was how much it cost. And so, born in Italy. He's in block 47, lot 74, grave 3. date of burial, December 3rd. So in order for somebody to find this grave, what we do, a lot of times I'll go to, this is our big book that was always handwritten in the locations way back then when. So here's his name, and I always say, who's nearby? So when you're trying to find one of these, because they probably don't have a headstone, so you can see exactly where they're located. So what I do, so then we have our block files, and I have quite a few volunteers and some wonderful ones. One who just got new signs donated and posts, and so before it ended at like block 36 or something, and now it goes back all the way to the back, 50 some. So here's where my office is, Harrison Avenue, and way back here is where this location is. And so people get pretty intimidated, how do I find that? So then I go back to this thing and we look at the names. So one thing I see, Louisa Walters, and her name is here in block 73, grave 3. And when I go out, I'll take pictures of headstones nearby, and then I put it in my computer, the block, lot, location, just for this reason. And so then, what do we have? Louisa Walter, block 47. So this grave, the Alfonso would be, so this is standing here, looking west, then Alfonso would be right behind her, just exactly behind her. And so, you know, if you look, so here's where he is, and so that's 70, he's in 74, she's in 73, so that's east. So that just, I'll usually draw a map up and so people can, that helps find them if I don't have time to go out personally and help them locate the grave. And these are some of my resources. We have a big walk-in safe and different files, and permits are all in there. We've got the yearbooks, 1912, St. Pat's, you know, different years. This is our big book that used to be kind of the, you know, Bible of the cemetery where everything was written in good, but then technology and computers, people started, you know, putting it there, and so then some things didn't get put in there. And so we're trying to get a new program called Crypt Keeper, which to try to organize everything, and I've got volunteers that have been helping me update records and find things and correct things, and so we're always looking for volunteers to help with that. So this is, like I said, the ledger books, and so, you know, here's one I just happen to have a picture of, and shows, and then it'll show the permit number if we want to look that up, and age, and just some of the stuff, and payments that were made, and balance.
How far back did they go?
Those ledger books, or
Yeah, records like that, in the late 1800s.
so.
Late 1800s.
No,
or
so these are the only ledger type books like this that I have. 1931 is the latest one of these, but in here there's a couple ledger books, but you know, takes a little digging, depends on what you're looking for. So those ledger books don't just have the financials, doesn't have any of that other detail. So my understanding is that one of our books, one day somebody was looking, and the sexton couldn't stay in the office and help out, and had to run do something, and came back and the person was gone and the book was gone.
Oh.
So, and actually, I was just telling Kim that I just got in the mail yesterday a book that somebody was selling a cemetery book online, and so I bought it so I can, you know, because I thought, oh, on eBay, you know, so.
And was that the missing one? Was it?
Oh no, this was like from Missouri, somewhere else, but I just, you know, thought I'd try to get it and then donate it back to their museum or their archives. But, so if you ever see one of these ledger books, please let us know, or if you find anything that, you know, because I used to work at the thrift store, and things that came through there were very interesting, and it's like, how did they get this? So also with genealogy, going beyond the obvious. Like I said, things you can find, and then, but also, people say, who's that in the grave next to us? Who's in our plot? Sometimes it was a church member, the person who sat next to him in church every Sunday. Maybe it was an employee, and the boss, you know, had compassion for the widow and buried the husband there. So sometimes, you know, you can find out where they lived, who would live next to them, and you can do that. We always say, you can't always pick your neighbors in life, but you can pick them in death. So, you know, that's, so sometimes neighbors will go and buy plots next to each other. So genealogy resources, these are some of my favorites, but one thing I want to remind you is that not everything you read online is true. Double check. Find a Grave is information supplied by volunteers, and so they're, you know, putting the best of their knowledge on there, but maybe it wasn't quite true. So always double check, and always check with, you know, friends and relatives.
Find a
And
grave will help you too if you need.
will they? Okay. Yeah. So, you know, a lot of those sources you can email them, call them, and they'll get you more information too. So here's one of my interesting things. I want to see if you guys can spot the oddity. Do you see? Right here.
Oh, a limb,
Limb.
Limb.
Who knew? What? Do you know what that's about?
Yeah.
So my theory on this is, as Catholics, we believe our body is a temple of the Holy Ghost in life as well as in death. And, you know, it was very serious about burying, and for the resurrection, they wanted their whole body to be there. So when they would bury a limb when there was an accident, so that way then when they died, their body would be placed in the grave with their limb. So in the resurrection, they'd be all together again. What do you think, Father? Have you heard anything about that?
No, that's the only theory I heard was from you, so.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's it. That's right.
So, where's the rest of his body?
What was that?
Where's the rest of his body?
Well, that's a good question, because there's been a couple people that didn't get buried with their body.
Yeah.
I found. So he may have been buried there, but it just didn't get updated on this record.
Okay.
So I but I found at least 12 incidences and several women of limbs being buried. So that was one of those interesting.
On Idaho Street in the 1890s, there was quite a large family of people with the last name of Lynn.
Oh, there is. You're right. There is somebody with the last name Lim. Because at first that's what I thought it was. The last name was Lim, and then I came across. I think I looked up an article, and there was like an accident, and so that's how I figured out.
Yeah.
That's what it was. And my from CFCS who's trained us, he's like, I've run cemeteries for years. I've done everything, and so I asked him about that. He's like, I've never heard of that. So that was, I'm like, oh, got you there. So there's,
Could you read us the headings across the top? Name,
so, oh, I'm sorry. So the name, volume, that's for the books that you saw in my file. And then the page number, the date of death, the age, who the undertaker was, and then any remarks. And sometimes there's a lot more information, and this was just,
so they weren't sequential, because look at the pages. You got book 111, on all four of them, and you start with page 1.
and this here is the lot, so this is block 355, and there's
No, I
B.
mean further over.
And then volume 3, 6. Right, because they, this was 1914, this was 1945. So these are random, and sometimes they were even just, so he might be placed here, there might be 4 other people, but the order isn't always going to be right, unfortunately. That's one of the joys of my job, the mystery of trying to figure out for sure who's where, what. And at St. Pat's, they had 4 blocks, or 4 lots per block. And so, like a 4 square, well, sometimes they would do lot 1, lot 2, lot 3, lot 4. Sometimes they do lot 1, lot 2, lot 3. So it's like, you just have to assume it's this area, right? So, you know, as my volunteers know. So here's another one of my big mysteries. Who is father? Because it's not in the block file. The person next to him died 1898, and I've researched, it was Sylvia Petroni. I've researched her, who her father was. I've, trying to figure out who Father is, and I've asked the New Granite Works and Trevelyan Johnson, do they remember doing or have record of the Father and nobody knows, and it's not in my record. So this is one of my mysteries. But these little solar lights, those have to have been within the last 10 years.
Right. That's interesting.
So who is Father? Who is that, and why is it not by record? So was he buried like soon after? Was it maybe? And somebody said, "Oh, a priest." I said, "Well, no, because we have the priest plot that priests were going to put in." So if anybody knows, come see me. So this is one of my favorite quotes. "The graveyard is the richest place on earth, because it is here that you will find all the hopes and dreams that were never fulfilled, the books that were never written, the songs that were never sung, the inventions that were never shared, the cures that were never discussed, all because someone was too afraid to take that first step, keep with the problem, or determined to carry out their dream." And that's by Les Brown. And
And is band of renown?
Yes, very.
what's that?
Les Brown is band of renown?
No,
Musician?
no, he's a motivational speaker. And so, remember, life is short. Follow your dreams and trust in the Lord that He will take care of you. People are afraid to try new things or do new things, but God's going to take care of you. And so, good luck. Thank you. One thing I forgot to mention was that some of the pictures I have were online, or some of them were on my computer, that I'm not sure where they always came from. So if, copyrights and all that, I apologize, but I know some of my volunteers have donated some of those pictures. So thank you, and I just thank all my volunteers, and thank you to the archives for allowing me to share.